Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a story that literally altered global travel forever. When you start unpacking the events of Japan Airlines Flight 123, you're going to find this incredible mix of harrowing mechanics, heartbreaking tragedy, and truly extraordinary heroism. It's a stark look at how a seemingly invisible error can cascade into a monumental catastrophe, and how, even in the face of impossible odds, human courage can just shine.
And the contrast here is really what makes this story so chilling. Picture this. It's the evening of August 12, 1985. This Boeing 747 takes off from Tokyo's Haneda Airport for a perfectly routine 54-minute domestic hop to Osaka. It's the kind of flight you don't even think twice about. Yet, it ultimately became aviation's deadliest single aircraft disaster.
To put the sheer human scale of this flight into perspective, we have to look at the numbers. There were 524 people on board. That's 509 passengers and 15 crew members. And these weren't just statistics, right? This was a cross-section of everyday life. We're talking families heading home from summer holidays, kids traveling, business professionals, 524 lives, all sharing the same enclosed space in the sky, completely unaware of what was about to happen.
But that sense of normalcy, it vanished almost instantly. Just 12 minutes, literally 12 minutes after takeoff, as the plane was climbing over central Japan, this violently loud bang echoed from the rear of the aircraft. In a fraction of a second, a routine trip transformed into a desperate fight for survival.
So that loud bang was actually the sound of a catastrophic structural failure, which caused immediate explosive decompression. The pressure difference physically ripped through the aircraft. Oxygen masks dropped, the cabin shook violently, and everyone was thrown into chaos. But the damage outside was honestly even worse. The explosive force completely destroyed and tore off the aircraft's vertical stabilizer. The tail fin that keeps the plane flying straight? Just gone.
To really grasp the severity of this, think about how a 747 is supposed to fly. The rupture didn't just take off the tail. It completely severed all four of the aircraft's hydraulic systems. Under standard control, hydraulics are essentially the muscles of the plane. They let the pilots move the flaps and rudders. Without them, Captain Masami Takahama and his crew had virtually zero control over this giant Boeing 747. They had to desperately try to steer this massive, crippled aircraft using only changes in engine power, literally throttling up on one side and down on the other just to turn. It is incredibly difficult and unstable.
And the sheer willpower of this flight crew really comes into focus when you look at the timeline of events. For more than 30 agonizing minutes, this crippled plane stayed in the air. It swung wildly from side to side in this terrifying roller coaster motion. For over half an hour, Captain Takahama and his team fought incredibly hard. They just refused to give up, trying everything possible to keep those hundreds of people alive.
Inside the cabin during those 30 minutes, the grim reality was setting in. The flight attendants bravely tried to calm everyone down for a potential emergency landing, but the passengers realized how dire the situation was. Some actually took out pens and paper and wrote these heartbreaking farewell messages to their loved ones. The emotional weight of those final moments is just unfathomable. Despite the pilots fighting literally until the very end, the physics of flying a plane with no tail and no hydraulics were simply insurmountable. At approximately 6:56 p.m., Flight 123 crashed into the mountainous terrain of Mount Takamagahara, northwest of Tokyo. The impact was catastrophic. It completely destroyed most of the aircraft the second it collided with the mountainside.
The devastating toll of that impact is a heavy reality to process. Out of the 524 people on board, 520 lives were lost. It instantly marked one of aviation's darkest, most tragic moments, and it sent absolute shockwaves around the entire world.
But amidst all that overwhelming darkness, there was a glimmer of the impossible. The next morning, rescue teams navigating that really difficult, unforgiving mountain terrain found 4 survivors. 4 people out of 524. Miraculously, all of these survivors had been seated in the very rear section of the plane, the part of the aircraft that actually separated from the main fuselage during the violence of the crash, sparing them from the worst of the impact.
Now this leaves us with a massive central mystery. Investigators had to ask, what caused a modern Boeing 747 to suffer a catastrophic structural failure out of absolutely nowhere? I mean, planes don't just fall apart in the sky during routine flights, right? Something had to have gone fundamentally wrong.
Well, the investigation traced the disaster back to a hidden ticking time bomb. It actually started 7 years before the crash, when this exact airplane suffered a tail strike during a landing.
The damaged rear pressure bulkhead was repaired, sure, but investigators discovered that Boeing failed to follow their own approved procedures. And because of this flawed repair, the structure slowly weakened over thousands of pressurization cycles, thousands of subsequent flights, until the metal finally fatigued to its breaking point, which resulted in that explosive decompression.
Discovering this massive oversight completely changed the industry. The legacy of Flight 123 led to sweeping, vital changes globally. It forced major overhauls in aircraft maintenance tracking and mandated much stricter, far more rigorous inspection procedures for structural repairs. These global aviation safety reforms were put in place to ensure that a structural failure stemming from a hidden repair flaw could never, ever happen again.
Today, while experts heavily study the mechanics of Flight 123, they also emphasize something else. The extraordinary, relentless heroism of Captain Takahama and his crew is just legendary. Handed a completely unwinnable scenario, an aircraft with no controls, they fought with every ounce of their being to save those people. Their professionalism in the face of certain doom remains one of the most remarkable examples of courage ever recorded.
You know, when we hear about plane crashes, we often assume a massive storm or critical mistake made in the cockpit. But the ultimate tragedy of Flight 123 is that it was brought down by neither. It was a hidden maintenance failure, a single, invisible mistake made during a repair that waited patiently in the tail of that aircraft for 7 long years to finally reveal itself.
The story of Flight 123 leaves us with a haunting reflection on systems, on safety, and on time itself. It forces us to ask, how long can a single hidden mistake wait before exacting its devastating toll? It's a sobering reminder of why absolute precision and integrity in engineering and maintenance matter so deeply. Because the consequences, even years down the line, can be absolute.